The blizzard howled like a banshee across the Wyoming Territory. It was December of 1876, and the wind didn't care who you were. It just wanted to freeze the breath in your lungs and turn your tears to ice. In this godforsaken cold, a man named Mason Reed was digging. Each time his shovel hit the frozen ground, it sounded like a hammer on a coffin nail. The earth didn't want to give. It fought him every inch of the way. Mason's hands, the same hands that had pulled bullets out of dying soldiers, were shaking so bad he could barely hold the handle. He was a doctor, but out here that didn't mean a thing. A few feet away, tucked under some branches, was a small pine box, the kind of box you'd use for bread, not a person. Inside that box was his 3-month-old daughter, Hannah. She was wrapped in his best blanket, her tiny chest barely moving, fighting for every single breath, and he was out here, digging her grave. The wind ripped across the ridge, and Mason had to stop. He didn't know if his eyes were burning from the cold or from the tears. He was a man who'd saved hundreds of lives in the war, but he couldn't save his own daughter. "I'm sorry, little one," he whispered, but the wind stole the words right out of his mouth. "I failed your mother. Now I've failed you." He slammed the shovel back into the ground. He was punishing the earth, punishing himself. His wife Abigail had died just a month ago. The childbirth seemed fine at first, then the fever came. The bleeding wouldn't stop. He'd used every bit of his medical training, but she slipped away from him as the sun came up. She left him alone with a newborn baby, a baby who wouldn't eat. For weeks, Mason tried everything. He warmed goat's milk to the perfect temperature. He added honey, then molasses. He tried different bottles, held her in different ways. Nothing worked. Hannah just turned her head away, her cries getting weaker and weaker each day. He'd ridden to every farm for miles, knocked on every door with the same desperate question. "Do you know any new mothers? Anyone who might be nursing?" He got nothing but kind words and shaking heads. "Sorry, Dr. Reed. No one's had a baby in months." The local pastor just patted his shoulder and said the Lord works in mysterious ways. Mason didn't want mysterious ways. He wanted his daughter to live. The shovel hit something hard. A rock. As he bent down to move it, he saw something out of the corner of his eye. Hannah was stirring in her box. Her tiny hand opened, her fingers reaching for the cold air, then curled back into a fist. She was still fighting. Mason dropped the shovel. He scrambled over to the box and knelt in the snow. He touched his daughter's cheek. It was still warm. She was still alive. "No," he said, his voice firm. "Not today." He picked up the box, shielding it from the snow, and walked back to the small cabin. The grave could wait. He had to try one more time. Inside, the fire was almost dead. He placed the box by the hearth and blew on the embers, desperately feeding them kindling until a small flame flickered to life. In the firelight, Hannah's face looked like a ghost's. He sat down, cradling her against his chest. She felt like nothing, a feather wrapped in wool. Her cries were just tiny, mewing sounds that ripped his heart out. "I used to be the best surgeon in the 4th Infantry," he whispered to her, rocking back and forth. "Men live because of these hands. But I can't save you." The next morning, he made one last, desperate attempt. He rode 3 miles to the crossroads and hammered a sign to a post. "Need breast milk urgently. Infant starving. Will pay any price." It was a crude sign, a desperate plea to a world that didn't seem to care. The wind was already tearing at the corners. It probably wouldn't last the day, but he had to try. 3 more days went by. Hannah got weaker. He was dipping a cloth in goat's milk and letting the drops fall between her lips, but she barely swallowed. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He was a ghost in his own home, watching his daughter fade away. That night, the worst storm of the winter hit. The wind screamed like a tortured animal. Snow piled up against the cabin until it covered the windows. He huddled by the fire with Hannah, talking to her, telling her stories about her mother. Just after midnight, he heard it. A sound that was impossible. A sound that couldn't be real. 3 sharp knocks on the door. He froze. No one, absolutely no one, would be out in this. It had to be the wind. But then it came again. Louder this time. Insistent. Mason stood up, his legs stiff. He shifted Hannah to one arm and unbarred the door. The wind almost tore it from his hands. A figure stood on his porch, a ghost in the swirling snow. It was a woman. She was soaked, her cloak heavy with ice. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear and direct. She looked right at him, right through the storm and the fear. "I hear you need help," she said. Mason just stared. He thought he was losing his mind, that his grief had finally conjured a spirit out of the storm. "Are you real?" The words just fell out of his mouth. A small smile touched her lips. "Very much so, and very cold. May I come in?" He stepped aside, and she swept in with a gust of wind and snow. He slammed the door shut and barred it. When he turned, she was already taking off her cloak. She was maybe in her early 30s, her face etched with hardship, but there was a quiet strength about her. "My name is Olivia Hawkins," she said. Before he could answer, Hannah let out a tiny, weak cry. In the sudden quiet of the cabin, it sounded like a scream. Olivia froze, her eyes locked on the bundle in his arms. And for a second, Mason saw something flash across her face. Pain, recognition, something else he couldn't name. Then, very slowly, she raised a hand to her chest, and that's when Mason saw it, dark stains spreading across the fabric of her dress. "How long has she been refusing food?" Olivia asked, her voice suddenly sharp, professional. "Almost since birth," Mason stammered. "Her mother, she died a month ago. I've tried everything." Olivia just nodded once. Then with calm, steady fingers, she began to unbutton the front of her dress. "5 months ago, I gave birth to a son," she said, her voice tight with a pain so deep it made Mason flinch. "James, he died 6 weeks ago. Scarlet fever." She swallowed hard, her eyes never leaving his. "My body, it hasn't understood that he's gone." And just like that, Mason understood. He looked from the stains on her dress to the tiny dying baby in his arms. Hope, so fierce it was terrifying, exploded in his chest. "You mean, you could?" He couldn't even finish the sentence. "Yes," Olivia said, her voice simple and clear. "If you'll let me." Part of him screamed no. This was a stranger, a ghost from the storm. But Hannah made another weak sound, her little fist clenching and unclenching. There was no choice. "Please," he said, his own voice breaking. "Please help her." Olivia sat in the chair by the fire and held out her arms. Mason, moving like a man in a dream, carefully placed his daughter into them. The change was immediate. Hannah's tiny head turned, her nostrils flaring. She knew. Olivia guided her with a practiced hand, and then it happened. The miracle. The baby latched on and began to nurse. The sound of her swallowing, desperate and greedy, filled the small cabin. Each gulp was a sound of life, a sound Mason thought he'd never hear again. He had to turn away. The relief was so overwhelming it felt like a physical blow. Gratitude, shame, and a sharp, surprising jealousy all mixed together in his gut. He busied himself with the fire, his back to them, trying to pull himself together. When he finally looked back, Olivia was watching Hannah, tears streaming silently down her face. "Thank you," Mason said, the words feeling small and useless. "I don't know how you found us." "Your sign," she said softly, not looking up. "At the crossroads. I was on my way to Jackson." "In this storm?" Mason couldn't believe it. Olivia finally met his eyes. "Some journeys can't wait for fair weather, Dr. Reed." Mason was stunned. "How did you know I'm a doctor?" A sad smile touched her lips. "You have the look. I've known many doctors." There was a story there, he knew it. But Hannah was eating. She was alive. Nothing else mattered. "Will you stay?" he asked. "The storm." "I'll stay as long as she needs me," Olivia said, her gaze already back on Hannah. "A child this hungry will need feeding again soon." Mason felt a wave of dizziness. He grabbed the table to steady himself. "When did you last sleep, doctor?" Olivia asked, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "I don't remember." "Then sleep now," she said. "I'll watch over her." He wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He was no good to anyone like this. He stumbled into the small back room and collapsed onto the cot. He only meant to close his eyes for a minute. He woke up to silence. The wind was gone. Pale morning light was filtering through the window. He sat bolt upright, a surge of panic hitting him. How long had he been asleep? He rushed into the main room, and the sight that met him stopped him cold. Olivia was sitting in the rocking chair, humming softly. Hannah was cradled in her arms, awake and alert. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, were wide and curious. Not hungry, not in pain, just peaceful. They looked like they belonged together. A mother and child. The thought sent a confusing jolt through him. He cleared his throat. Olivia looked up. "Good morning," she said. "She's doing much better. We've had 2 good feedings while you slept." Mason walked toward them, slow, as if he was afraid of breaking a spell. Hannah's head turned at the sound of his steps. She looked right at him, and for the first time in forever, she really saw him. "She recognizes me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Of course she does," Olivia replied. "She knows her father." He reached out, and Olivia gently passed Hannah into his arms. She felt different, heavier, real. "I don't know how to thank you," he started, but Olivia shook her head. "She was hungry. I had milk. It's as simple as that." But it wasn't simple. This woman had walked out of a blizzard and saved his daughter's life. Nothing about that was simple. "I should prepare to leave," Olivia said, straightening her dress. "Now that the storm has passed." "No!" The word came out louder than he intended. "I mean, Hannah will need you. The roads will be impassable for days." Olivia hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," Mason insisted. He needed her. For Hannah, yes. But the thought of her leaving, of being alone with that suffocating fear again, was more than he could bear. "Very well," she said after a long moment. "Until she's stronger." As if on cue, Hannah started to fuss, rooting against his shirt. "She's hungry again," Olivia said with a small smile. A good sign. He handed Hannah back, forcing himself to look away as Olivia began to nurse her. He put on his coat. "The chicken coop will be buried. I need to dig them out." Olivia just looked at him with a raised eyebrow. "We'll be just fine, Dr. Reed." Outside, the world was a sea of white. As he dug out the chickens, his mind was racing. Who was this woman? What was she doing traveling alone in the middle of winter? A part of him, the doctor, knew there was more to her story. But the other part, the father who had been staring into a tiny grave just yesterday, didn't want to ask. He didn't want to question the miracle. When he got back to the cabin, arms full of eggs and firewood, he found the place transformed. Olivia had found Abigail's apron. A pot was bubbling on the stove, and Hannah was sleeping peacefully in her cradle. It looked like a home again. "I hope you don't mind," Olivia said. "I found some beans and salt pork." It had been so long since anyone else had cooked in this kitchen, since Abigail. "I don't mind," he said. "Thank you." They ate in a tense, but not unfriendly silence. He found himself studying her. Her hands weren't soft. They were scarred and calloused. This was a woman who knew hardship. "You said you were headed to Jackson," he said, breaking the silence. "Family there?" "No," she said, her face unreadable. "Just a fresh start. My husband died in the war. There's no one else." "You were a nurse, you said? During the war?" Her hands stilled for a second. "Yes, field hospitals, wherever the fighting was worst." He was impressed. He knew what those places were like, a kind of hell on earth. "I was an army surgeon," he offered. "4th Infantry." "Probably," she said, not meeting his eyes. There was something she wasn't telling him. He was sure of it. But then Hannah started to stir, and Olivia was on her feet instantly. "Right on schedule," she said, and for the first time he saw a genuine smile on her face. As he watched her settle into the rocking chair with his daughter, he felt a tangle of emotions: gratitude, guilt, and a strange, unexpected longing. He couldn't stay inside. He had to move. He went out to split more wood, the rhythmic chop of the axe a welcome distraction. What was he doing, letting a complete stranger into his home, into his life? But what choice did he have? Hannah needed her. And if he was being honest, he needed her too. The emptiness of the last month had almost broken him. He'd been so close to the edge. When he came back inside at dusk, the cabin was clean. Dishes were washed. Hannah's things were laundered and drying by the fire. And Olivia was sitting there, mending one of Hannah's gowns with tiny, perfect stitches. The simple domestic scene hit him with the force of a physical blow. It was everything he had lost. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. She just shrugged. "I'm not used to being idle." Later that night, as they sat by the fire, he found himself talking about Abigail, about their dreams for this place, about how she had loved the wildness of Wyoming. "She sounds remarkable," Olivia said softly. "She was," he said. And then he told her about the birth, the fever, the helplessness he felt as he watched his wife die. "You can't save everyone, Doctor," Olivia said, and her voice was filled with a pain that he recognized. "Not even the ones you love most." She was talking about her own son, James. "The fever came so suddenly," she whispered, her hands twisting in her lap. "One day he was laughing, and the next he was gone. All my knowledge was useless. I've never felt so powerless as when he stopped breathing in my arms." The raw honesty of her words built a bridge between them. Two strangers, bound together by a shared, unspeakable grief. Then she asked him a question that made him flinch. "What made you put Hannah in that box? When I arrived, she was in a wooden box, not her cradle." He couldn't look at her. The shame burned in his chest. "I was preparing," he admitted. "I thought she wouldn't last the night. I was digging her grave." He expected judgment, condemnation. But when he looked up, her eyes were filled with a deep, sorrowful understanding. "We do what we must to protect ourselves from the pain," she said quietly, "even when it makes no sense to others." And in that moment, he felt seen. Not as a doctor, not as a widower, but just as a man who had been pushed to his absolute limit. "Thank you," he said, and the words meant more than she could ever know. For everything. As the days turned into a week, then two, a new rhythm settled over the cabin. It was as if Olivia had always been there. But Mason watched her. He noticed things, the way she always stood by the window at sunrise, watching the horizon like a soldier on guard, the way she startled at the sound of a horse on the road, the small, white, embroidered handkerchief she kept tucked in her pocket, the one she would hold in her hands when she thought no one was looking. He knew it had belonged to her son, James, but there was something more to it, a secret she was holding close. He didn't push. He was afraid that if he did, she might disappear back into the storm she came from. And he couldn't let that happen, not for Hannah's sake, and not for his own. One morning, he announced he was going into town for supplies. "I need to check for mail," he said, "and I need to tell Frank, my brother-in-law, about our arrangement." At the mention of Frank, a shuddered look came over Olivia's face. "Of course," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "We'll be fine." The ride into Sage Creek was slow. The small town was a shock to his system after weeks of isolation. The first person he saw in the general store was the preacher's wife, Mrs. Thompson. "Dr. Reed!" she exclaimed. "We heard your little girl is doing better. The Lord has answered our prayers." Mason nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, she's much better." "It must be that wet nurse you found," the store owner, Mr. Miller, chimed in. "A traveler," Mason said, trying to keep it simple. "A widow who lost her own child. She's been helping out." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened. A stranger? Staying with you? All alone out there?" Mason's jaw tightened. "She saved my daughter's life." Just then, the door opened and Dr. Parker, the town's only other physician, walked in. "Reed," he said with a gruff nod. "Heard about your visitor. This nurse who appeared in the storm. Describe her to me." Mason hesitated, then gave a brief description of Olivia. Dr. Parker's eyes narrowed. "Thought so," he muttered. "Nurse Hawkins, is it? I worked with her at Gettysburg, one of the best I ever saw." Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But that's not all she was known for. She had a reputation for bending the rules, treating Confederate soldiers, sneaking medicine to prisoners. Some even said she helped them escape." Before Mason could process this, the door opened again. It was Frank, Abigail's brother, and he did not look happy. "So you finally show your face in town," he said, his voice cold. "I heard you've got some strange woman living with you. It's barely been a month since Abby died." The words hit Mason like a slap. "That's unfair, Carter," Dr. Parker cut in. "His niece was starving. He did what he had to do." Frank's anger seemed to waver. "Is that true, Mason? Was it that bad?" Mason's throat was tight. "I was digging her grave, Frank." The blunt words hung in the air. Frank looked away, his own eyes suddenly bright. "Well," he said gruffly, "I'm glad she's better. But you don't know anything about this woman." "I do," Dr. Parker said. "I know she saved more lives than most doctors I knew, including some she wasn't supposed to." Frank's eyebrows shot up, but then his expression hardened again. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This was posted at the sheriff's office in Jackson," he said. "I thought you should see it." Mason unfolded the paper. His blood ran cold. It was a wanted poster. The drawing was crude, but the likeness was unmistakable. It was Olivia, or rather, a woman named Elizabeth Hayes, wanted for theft of military supplies and aiding the escape of Confederate prisoners. Reward, $500. "Bounty hunters brought it in," Frank said. "2 of them. They're in town now, asking questions." Mason stared at the poster, his mind reeling. Olivia, a fugitive, with a price on her head. He had to get back to the cabin. He had to warn her. As he mounted his horse, he saw them. 2 hard-looking men coming out of the saloon. They scanned the street with cold, calculating eyes. Bounty hunters. He kicked his horse into a gallop. The icy road be damned. He had to get home. He had to get to Olivia. The wanted poster felt like a block of ice in his pocket. This woman had saved his child. She had brought his home back from the brink of despair. And now he had to confront her. He had to ask her if she was a liar, a thief, a criminal, and he had to do it before those 2 men from the saloon came knocking on his door. He found her in the cabin, humming to Hannah. The picture of domestic peace. It made what he had to do even harder. "Was there news in town?" she asked, sensing his mood. He just looked at her. "Dr. Parker recognized your name," he said. "He worked with you at Gettysburg." She went still. "What else did he say?" This was it. The moment of truth. He couldn't bring himself to show her the poster. Not yet. "He said you had a reputation for following your conscience," Mason said, "even when it contradicted orders." Her gaze didn't waver. "And does that concern you, Dr. Reed?" The formal title was like a wall going up between them. "It makes me curious," he said, his voice quiet. "About who you really are, Olivia Hawkins. Or should I say, Elizabeth Hayes?" The name hit her like a punch. The color drained from her face. She didn't deny it. "I haven't heard that name in a long time," she whispered. "There are bounty hunters in town," he said, his voice flat. "Looking for you. There's a $500 reward." She stood up and went to the window, her whole body tense, ready to run. "I've seen thousands of men die," she said, her back to him. "Confederate, Union. In death, they were all the same. They all called for their mothers." She told him everything. Her real name was Elizabeth Hayes. She'd been a nurse in the war. She'd treated wounded Confederate soldiers against the orders of her superior, a cruel and ambitious man named Major Ellis Hargrove. She'd smuggled medical supplies out of a well-stocked depot to give to the field hospitals where men were dying for lack of them. "And the prisoners?" Mason asked. "The poster said you helped them escape." She told him about a group of officers being held in inhuman conditions on Hargrove's direct orders. She'd given them medicine and clothes, but the escape had gone wrong. A guard had been killed, and she was blamed. "I was warned they were coming to arrest me," she said. "I ran. I changed my name. I've been running ever since." She told him about marrying another man, a widower, about having her son, James, and about losing them both. "I heard rumors Hargrove had hired bounty hunters," she said. "I couldn't stay in one place." Then she turned and looked at him, her eyes filled with a raw, painful honesty. "It wasn't chance that brought me to your door, Mason. I heard about you in Jackson. A doctor whose baby was starving. I sought you out. After James died, her body had kept producing milk, a constant, torturous reminder of what she'd lost. When I heard about Hannah," she whispered, "it felt like a purpose for my pain, a child who needed exactly what I had to give." The confession hung in the air between them. It wasn't a miracle. It was a calculated act of desperation, hers and his. "I understand why you didn't tell me," he said finally, "but it doesn't change the fact that those men are coming here." "Then I have to leave," she said immediately. "I've put you and Hannah at risk for too long." "No," he said. "Hannah needs you. Mason, Hannah is stronger now. She might take goat's milk." "And if she can't?" he demanded. "I won't watch her starve again, and I won't risk you being dragged away by those men." "Give me time," he pleaded. "Just a little time to think." That night, he burned the wanted poster in the fire. Whatever she had done, she had saved his daughter. That was the only truth that mattered. But it didn't solve the problem of the men who were coming for her. The next day, Frank showed up. He looked awkward, but determined. "Those bounty hunters," he said, his voice low. "They're still in town, asking more questions. Someone will talk eventually." Mason's heart sank. "I'm working on a plan." "You care for her, don't you?" Frank said. It wasn't a question. "It's been a month, Mason," he added, his voice gentle, "since Abby." "I know what month it is," Mason said quietly. When Frank left, Mason found Olivia in the barn, ready to flee. "I heard him," she said. "It's too dangerous." "We could leave," he said impulsively. "All of us. Start fresh somewhere else." She just looked at him, her eyes full of a sad wisdom. "You can't run from this, Mason. This is your home. This is everything you and Abigail built. I won't let you throw it away from me." "Then we fight," he said, the idea forming as he spoke. "We don't fight the charges in a courtroom. We go after Hargrove himself. We find evidence of his own wrongdoing and we use it to make him back down." "Blackmail a Union major?" she asked, incredulous. "That's your plan?" "It's not blackmail," he insisted. "It's negotiation." Just then, a sharp, distressed cry came from the cabin. "Hannah!" They both ran. She was fine, just hungry. But as Olivia picked her up and soothed her, Mason knew he couldn't let her go. He couldn't lose this fragile, broken family they were starting to build. "Stay," he said. "Please, at least until we can find a better way." She looked at him, at the baby in her arms, and slowly, she nodded. He knew he had to do something. He rode back into town, this time going straight to Dr. Parker's office. "I need your help," he said. "I need everything you know about Hargrove." Parker didn't hesitate. He went to a locked cabinet and pulled out a dusty, leather-bound ledger. "My personal journal from Gettysburg," he said. "It contains dated entries, Hargrove's orders, supplies he withheld, the men who died because of it." It was more than Mason could have hoped for. A weapon. "Before you take this," Parker warned, "you need to understand the risk. Hargrove is a powerful man now. If you use this and fail, he will come after all of you." Mason thought of Olivia. He thought of Hannah. The risk of doing nothing was far greater. "I understand," he said. As he was leaving, Parker gave him one last piece of information. "The bounty hunters. Their names are Sims and Reeves. They're watching the roads. Be careful." He wasn't careful enough. On the ride home, he saw them. 2 riders, emerging from the trees behind him. They were following him. He spurred his horse off the trail, plunging into the deep snow of the forest. He knew these woods. They didn't. A rifle shot cracked the air, splintering bark from a tree next to his head. They weren't just following. They were trying to stop him. He reached the frozen surface of Blackwater Creek. It was a gamble, a desperate one. He urged his horse onto the ice. It creaked, but it held. He heard shouts behind him as the 2 men followed. The combined weight was too much. A loud crack echoed through the trees, followed by shouts of alarm and the panicked screaming of horses. He didn't look back. He circled wide, making sure he wasn't followed, and finally reached the ridge overlooking his home. The light in the window was a beacon of hope, but he knew, with a cold certainty, that the danger was closer than ever. He burst into the cabin, Parker's journal clutched in his hand. "They followed me," he said, bolting the door. "They'll be here soon." Olivia's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "We need to leave," he said. "Tonight." "In this cold? With Hannah? It's too dangerous." "Staying is more dangerous." He showed her the journal. "This is our only hope," he said. "If we can get this to the right people in Washington—" His words were cut short by the sound of approaching horses. They were here. "The root cellar," he said urgently. "Hide. I'll try to send them away." "They won't be fooled," she said, already grabbing Hannah. "I won't let them take you," he said, his voice fierce. "The journal," she said suddenly. "They can't find the journal." He pried up a loose floorboard under Abigail's rocking chair and hid the book. "Go," he said. "The back door. Head for the line shack on the North Ridge. I'll stall them." She hesitated. Then she did something that stunned him. She stepped forward and kissed him. A brief, desperate kiss, full of fear and promise. "Be careful," she whispered. And then she was gone. A heavy knock rattled the door. "Open up!" He took a deep breath and opened it, his rifle in his hand. 2 hard-faced men stood on his porch. "We're looking for a woman," the older one, Sims, said. "Elizabeth Hayes." "Never heard of her," Mason lied. "We followed you from town, Doc," the other one, Reeves, said. "We know she's here." They pushed their way inside and searched the cabin. They found Olivia's shawl. "My late wife's," Mason said. "But they weren't buying it." "Where's the baby, Doc?" Sims asked, his eyes cold. "It's awfully quiet for a house with a baby." The lie died in his throat. He knew it was no use. Just as he was bracing for the worst, the bounty hunters went outside, and they found the tracks. Fresh footprints in the snow leading away from the back of the cabin. "Looks like your sister-in-law left in a hurry, Doc," Sims said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Mason raised his rifle. "Leave her alone." Sims just laughed. "You're outnumbered, Doc, and I'm betting you've never shot a man." He was right, and they both knew it. Just as all hope seemed lost, he heard more horses, 3 riders. It was Frank and Dr. Parker, and with them was Sheriff Mills. "Evening, gentlemen," the sheriff said, his voice calm but firm. "Seems we've got a situation here. The bounty hunters tried to bluff, but the sheriff wasn't having it. I've seen your wanted poster," he said. "It's a private bounty notice, not a federal warrant. There's a big difference." Then Dr. Parker spoke up. "The charges against this woman were brought by a man with a personal vendetta, and I have the evidence to prove it." Sims and Reeves exchanged an uneasy look. This was getting more complicated than a simple bounty. "First light tomorrow," the sheriff said. "My office. We'll review this evidence. Until then, you will stand down." The bounty hunters weren't happy, but they agreed. They rode off, and Mason was left with his unexpected allies. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "Don't thank us yet," the sheriff warned. "We've only bought you some time." "I'll go with you," Frank said, as Mason prepared to ride to the line shack. 2 riders are safer than 1. Mason found Olivia and Hannah huddled by the stove in the tiny shack. He told her what had happened. They had a reprieve, a chance, but the fight was far from over. In the weeks that followed, a strange new normal set in. Olivia was under house arrest at the cabin. The bounty hunters waited in town, and the whole community of Sage Creek seemed to rally around the doctor and the mysterious nurse who had saved his child. Small gifts of food appeared on their porch. Neighbors would just happen to ride by whenever the bounty hunters were seen nearby. Frank became a regular visitor, his gruff exterior slowly melting away. Dr. Parker sent his journal along with sworn statements from Mason and Olivia to a powerful senator in Washington. And slowly, in the quiet moments between the fear and the uncertainty, something began to grow between Mason and Olivia. They talked. They laughed. They found a comfort in each other's presence that neither had expected. Then, one day, a letter arrived from the territorial marshal. The bounty hunters were ordered to stand down until a full federal investigation could be conducted. They left town the next day, their faces grim. The immediate danger was over. That night, Mason and Olivia stood on the porch, watching the stars. "It's not over," she said softly. "Hargrove will fight this." "I know," he said, putting his arm around her, "but we'll face whatever comes next together." He looked at her then, at this woman who had walked out of a blizzard and into the wreckage of his life, and he knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, that he was in love with her. "I love you," he said, "not because you saved Hannah, but because of who you are." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, "more than I thought was possible." A small cry came from inside the cabin. Olivia smiled against his lips. "Duty calls," she said. Mason caught her hand. "Our duty," he corrected gently. "Our daughter." And together, they went inside to their child, closing the door on the darkness, a new family forged in the fire of a Wyoming winter. The fight wasn't over, but they had found something more important than safety. They had found home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of the unexpected. And let me know in the comments below, what would you have done in Mason's position?